So the United States has reportedly conducted a raid in Syria targeting the ISIL leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. We have these exclusive pictures just in of the aftermath of the raid on a house in the province of Idlib. There are conflicting reports, we have to say, about whether this operation was a success or not, but the US magazine Newsweek is citing a US Army official who says Baghdadi was killed. 48-year-old Iraqi, though, has been reported dead several times before. Now, ahead of the US media reports, the president, Donald Trump, tweeted this, just one line: something very big has just happened. The White House says Trump will make a major announcement at 1300 hours GMT Sunday, which is just under 5 hours from now. So here's our team to talk through this. We'll be with Zaina Khodr in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, for a bit of background in a moment, but we're starting with Natasha Ghoneim in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Zaina, in the absence of confirmation from the Americans so far, what have we learned about the actual raid itself?
Are you talking to me, Kamal? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes, go ahead, Natasha, yeah.
Okay, I thought you said Zaina. Look, if in fact al-Baghdadi is dead, this would be a huge coup and a welcome one for the United States and its allies. For years, there has been a manhunt for al-Baghdadi, a $25 million bounty on his head. For years, there have been many raids by the United States and its allies in an attempt to capture al-Baghdadi. Again, we do not have confirmation that he is, in fact, one of the senior terrorist leaders, that's a direct quote from Army officials in the United States, who were killed during this raid. But we do believe, based on the telegraphing that's coming from Trump, the nature of the White House announcement on a Sunday at 9 a.m. in the morning, Washington, D.C. time, that for sure, whatever this news is, the U.S. administration certainly considers it big news. This is what we know, that an elite group with the U.S. Army was assisted by the Central Intelligence Agency with reconnaissance and intelligence gathering on the ground. They went into a compound in Idlib in Syria. That's in the northwest portion of Syria. It's quite near the Syria-Turkey border. During this raid, sources are telling American news outlets that a man detonated a suicide vest, and that is what where all these information is circulating, that the man who detonated that suicide vest was in fact the head of ISIL. It's a bit unusual, by the way. Analysts are saying that he would have been hiding out in Idlib. There are other armed groups in Idlib that are considered rivals of ISIL, not allies, but also with this fluid situation on the ground in Syria, ISIL fighters had also been fleeing to the Idlib area. So perhaps if Baghdadi was in fact in that area, he might have attempted to take refuge with these ISIL fighters.
And Natasha, reaction, anything from the Iraqis so far?
Well, as you can imagine, if in fact al-Baghdadi is dead, this is going to be extremely welcome news here in Iraq. Baghdadi was an Iraqi. He began his so-called caliphate in 2014 in Mosul and then wreaked havoc on the country and affected the lives of millions here alone. The Iraqi government is planning to make a statement of its own later on today. Iraqi television is already circulating pictures of this raid, and what we're hearing is that there's already a crisis here in the country with the government fighting for its survival. There are thousands who have been on the streets once again this month protesting against the government, asking for the government to resign. And what analysts are saying is that this could be a moment for the Iraqi government to divert the attention away from these domestic issues, if in fact Baghdadi was killed, to portray this as a victory and one in which they played a role in. Iraqi government is reminding people that it has worked alongside the United States and the U.S.-led coalition to defeat ISIL by offering intelligence gathering and assistance.
Natasha Ghoneim there in Baghdad. Thank you. Apologies for the confusion before, but we are going to talk to Zaina Khodr now, who's in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, for a bit of a background on the man himself, how he rose to power, Zaina, quite so quickly, and, well, more to the point, how ISIL, under his leadership, moved quite so quickly back in 2014.
Well, he was the man behind ISIL's expansion and creation. The roots of ISIL is from al-Qaeda in Iraq. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq in 2010. How was he able to expand control and gain all this power? Well, he exploited two things. First of all, the security vacuum in neighboring Syria. At the time, many areas in northern Syria were outside the control of the government. There was a war, and he managed to exploit this to be able to regroup, to attract fighters, to recruit fighters, because what he relied on was exploiting the grievances of the Sunni population, both in Iraq and Syria. In Iraq, it was a Shia-led government was in control of the country. The security forces were really most of the Sunni population in the center of Iraq. They were afraid of the security forces. They were afraid of the government. In neighboring Syria, it was the same thing. The Sunnis felt that they were under attack by an Alawite-led government, which is backed by Iran. So he used those two things. He exploited the security vacuum and he exploited the grievances of the Sunni population. And soon he took control of territory in Syria, in Iraq, taking over cities, declaring the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. But soon people started to turn against him because of the way his fighters were dealing with the people. They were oppressing people. They were imposing a very strict interpretation of Islamic law. And he was also under fire from rebel groups, Syrian opposition rebel groups who did not believe in the creation of this Islamic State. He also had differences with al-Qaeda in Syria. So he was up against, he had a lot of enemies. And of course, the US-led coalition, with the help of Kurdish fighters both in Syria and in Iraq, managed to take control of territory from his group. And they were fighting for their last stronghold in March this year in Baghuz, which was just a small town. They lost control of the town in March, really the US declared the territorial defeat of ISIL. But then we saw, a month later, Baghdadi appear in a video, his first video in 5 years, trying to rally support, saying that we have not been defeated. And just last month, a purported audio message from the ISIL leader. So he was really behind the group's expansion and creation. But if indeed his death has been confirmed, it will be a blow to the group, which really has suffered a lot of losses in recent years.
Zaina Khodr in Beirut, thank you. We'll continue the conversation with Marwan Kablan, Director of Policy Analysis at the Arab Centre for Research and Policy Studies. Maybe we can just pick up on what we were saying with Zaina there, what Zaina said at the end of their answer, how much of a blow it will be to ISIL. Because with any group like this, with an ISIL group or an al-Qaeda group, if the leadership is decapitated, it is a big loss. But these groups are bigger than one person.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think it's a big blow to ISIL losing its leader. But as you said, I mean, this is not very centralized organization, in the sense we don't have a very clear hierarchy here that one leader is actually controlling all the branches and all the people that are part of the organization. So we have seen actually many attacks in different places, not taking orders from al-Baghdadi himself actually, but people acting on their own initiative. So a big blow indeed, but it's not the end of the organization, especially the motives which have created or led to the creation of ISIL are still very much there. Anger, negligence, exclusion, especially of the Sunni population in Syria and Iraq, and many other places around the region. So I think they will remain active for many years to come, but very much weakened, absolutely.
Well, how strong would you describe ISIL as being now? I know that's a very broad question because it's across a very wide area.
I think we have to differentiate two levels here. If we are talking about the military operational level, it has been weakened a lot because it has been, I mean, defeated in Syria and in Iraq to a great extent. They lost their capital in Raqqa. They lost al-Mosul in 2017. They lost most of the territories they gained starting in 2013, 2014. But if we are talking about the intellectual, ideological level, it's a completely different issue because the idea is still very much alive. As I said, as long as the motives, the causes which have actually led to the rise of the organization are still very much there. unless we deal, because security approach is not the cure to the phenomena of ISIL. I think we have to deal with it in a different way. And don't forget today that we have al-Hol camp in Syria. And this camp, in my opinion, if we don't deal with it in a very smart way, because you have all the children and women of ISIL are held there without schools, without services, without any sort of supervision. So if we don't actually deal with this camp and many other such places that have been left actually after the defeat of ISIL, I think we are going to see more of those people getting recruited by the organization. These kids who are today 10 or 12 years old, in 5, 6, 7 years, they will become grown up, and I think they will become a very important pool of recruitment for ISIL if we don't deal with this in a very smart way.
And all potentially exacerbated by other events in Syria, like the withdrawal of US forces?
Absolutely. And also, I mean, don't forget that if you have the Syrian regime taking control back of most of these territories without changing the approach, which in the first place have led to the rise of ISIL, I think that resentment will remain there. And resentment is, in my opinion, the major issue that we have to deal with here if we want to eliminate ISIL completely on the ideological level.
Marwan Kablan, thank you for now. We'll talk to you again later on, hopefully, as we get some more information on this story. Thank you.